There was a job in Tudor England, one of the most powerful positions in the entire royal court. Men competed fiercely for it. Everyone who held it under Henry VIII was eventually knighted. One of them ended up controlling the king's personal finances. Another one effectively held Henry's royal signature stamp and helped draft his will. The job? Wiping the king's rear end. And here's the thing. That's not even close to the strangest part of this story. So today we're going all the way back through human history to answer the question that sounds simple but goes somewhere genuinely weird. How did people handle basic hygiene before toilet paper existed? And the answer isn't just they used leaves. It involves gladiator suicides, bathroom explosions, broken pottery with enemies' names carved into it, and a medieval profession where people literally drowned in cesspits. I've gone deep on this one, and by the end, one detail is going to completely reframe the way you think about the whole thing. Let's start at the top. In Tudor England, one of the most trusted and prestigious positions at court was the groom of the stool, the person who attended the English king on the toilet. That sounds like a punchline. It was not. The role came with generous compensation, prestigious lodgings inside royal palaces, and something more valuable than salary: daily, informal access to the king. Think about what that actually means. Every other advisor, every duke, every minister, they had to request an audience, wait in line, hope the king was in a good mood. The groom just walked in. Every single day. These grooms became trusted confidants and even political advisors, and the intimacy of the role created an unusual path to power. Every groom of the stool during Henry's reign was eventually knighted. Sir Anthony Denny, one of Henry's final grooms, had a special key of gold that could lock and unlock the king's personal chambers, and he even had control over the king's stamp. Effectively his royal signature, which gave Denny the symbolic power of signing the king's name. That's not a bathroom attendant. That's the second most powerful man in England, and his entire career started because he was willing to do a job nobody else wanted. The role grew in importance during the Tudor period, especially after Henry VII moved much of the administration of the government, including its finances, to the Privy Chamber where the groom resided, which led to a more administrative role for many grooms, and their constant access to the king made it an enviable position for the level of influence a groom might wield. Now here's the twist inside the twist. The next two Tudor monarchs after Edward VI, Mary I and Elizabeth I, did not have a groom of the stool, since it was considered inappropriate for a male to attend to a queen's toileting needs. So one hygiene job accidentally tells you everything about gender and power in the Tudor court. The moment a woman took the throne, the most politically connected position in the kingdom just vanished. That's not a footnote, that's the whole story of court politics in one sentence. But okay, that's the Tudor world. Let's go back further, because before there were royal courts and velvet commodes, there were Romans. And the Romans had a system that most people think they know, but almost nobody actually gets right. Here's what you've probably heard. Ancient Romans used a sponge on a stick called a tussorium, shared it in public latrines, and rinsed it between uses. That part is mostly true. According to many historians, the Romans' answer to rear hygiene was the tussorium, basically a sponge on a stick, with a sea sponge from the Mediterranean attached to the end of a wooden rod. But here's where things get a little sticky. The tussorium may have been for communal use. Public latrines would have had a shared tussorium that was rinsed between uses, normally by placing it into the channel of water that ran through the latrine, and perhaps also by dipping it into a bucket of water with added salt or vinegar. So yes, one sponge, shared by everyone in the room. Already pretty wild. But here's what almost nobody mentions. The most famous historical account we have of the tussorium doesn't come from a hygiene guide or a medical text. It comes from a gruesomely unforgettable passage in a letter by the philosopher Seneca to a Roman official, describing the suicide of a Germanic gladiator who shoved a stick tipped with a sponge, devoted to the vilest uses, down his throat rather than head into the arena to die by wild animal. That's the primary source historians still cite. A suicide account is essentially the user manual for ancient Roman bathroom hygiene. And now here's the part that makes this even stranger. Because modern researchers are actually questioning the whole story. The greatest proponent of the revisionist theory is Austrian archaeologist Gilbert Whiplinger, who argues that the popular idea that Romans used the tussorium to clean their behinds is incorrect. Having reviewed ancient textual sources, he notes that none of them clearly describes the sponge on a stick being used for personal hygiene, and that a more logical explanation would be its use as a toilet brush. As archaeologist Jennifer Bates from the University of Pennsylvania put it, the question is, do you use it to clean yourself or to clean the latrine? So one of the most repeated gross facts in all of ancient history might be completely wrong. The sponge might have just been for cleaning the seat. And if that's true, then what were Romans actually using? Environmental archaeologist Mark Robinson, having examined scraps of cloth in an ancient septic tank in Herculaneum, concluded that fabric scraps were likely used instead of a sponge. We're still not sure. The debate is genuinely open, and I love that because it means the most confidently stated gross ancient fact is actually a question mark. Now the Greeks had their own approach, and honestly it was worse. In Greece, people used pessoi, small flat pieces of pottery, sometimes inscribed with the names of enemies. You read that right. Ancient Greeks would scratch a rival's name onto a pottery shard and use it for hygiene. It was a symbolic insult, the ancient equivalent of printing someone's face on toilet paper, except the pottery was sharp and the insult was real. And here's the connection almost nobody makes. The Greek word ostrakon, the pottery shard, is the same root word as ostracism, the political practice of voting to exile someone from the city. The same object used to humiliate someone in the bathroom was used to banish them from society. That's a through line that got lost somewhere in history class. And while we're still in the ancient world, I have to tell you about the Roman latrine situation because it gets worse before it gets better. Much worse. Roman public latrines were notorious for terrifying customers when flames exploded from their seat openings, caused by gas explosions of hydrogen sulfide and methane that were both rank and frightening. Roman communal latrines had no plumbing traps, so gas could build up beneath the seats and, under the right conditions, ignite. Customers also had to worry about rats threatening to bite their bottoms. And then there was the perceived threat of demons that the Romans believed inhabited these black holes, leading to the mysterious underbelly of the city. Romans reportedly wore protective amulets specifically to ward off these dangers. So the full picture of Roman public hygiene isn't just no toilet paper. It's no toilet paper, a communal sponge of disputed purpose, and occasional bathroom explosions. That said, Rome did take its waste management seriously in ways that still impress historians. Pliny the Elder, one of Rome's most famous writers, singled out the sewer system as one of the most remarkable accomplishments in all of Roman engineering, ranking it alongside monuments and roads. Rome was genuinely proud of its plumbing in a way that feels strange to us now, but made complete sense when the alternative was what came next. Because after Rome, things got significantly grimmer. Medieval England had no aqueducts, no running water under the streets, and no real system for dealing with the scale of human waste building up in cities. So they invented a profession. A gong farmer was someone who dug out and removed human excrement from privies and cesspits. Because the work was considered unclean and off-putting to the public, gong farmers were only allowed to work at night, and the waste they collected had to be taken outside the city boundary or to official dumps for disposal. They worked by hand in the dark, waist-deep in years of accumulated waste, with no ventilation. For all their compensation, gong farmers faced horrifying occupational hazards that claimed lives regularly. The greatest danger came from toxic gases, primarily hydrogen sulfide and methane, that accumulated in enclosed waste pits. And then there's Richard. The 1326 London coroner's roll records the death of Richard the Raker, a cesspit cleaner who drowned after falling through a rotted privy floor. The worst part? He wasn't even working. It was his day off, and it was his own privy. The man whose job was to manage everyone else's cesspits died in his own. That's the kind of historical detail that sounds made up, but is sitting right there in the court records. Now, if you're enjoying this rabbit hole, and I'm guessing you are, I've got another video that goes deep on how ancient civilizations handled things we take completely for granted today. It's in the cards right now, and it's worth the watch. But first, let me finish this with the thing I promised you at the start, because it reframes everything. Here's what's actually interesting about all of this. We look back at Roman communal latrines, at the shared sponge, at the pottery shards, at the gong farmers, and our instinct is to think, how did they live like that? How was any of that acceptable? But that's the wrong question. Roman public latrines had continuous running water flowing beneath the seats through stone channels connected to aqueducts, with a second shallower channel of clean water running in front of the seats. That was infrastructure. That was engineering. That was a civilization that built a system and maintained it, and the people using it weren't horrified. They were just using the bathroom. The Romans had a wholly different relationship with the act of sitting on the toilet than we do. And evidence suggests they lingered in those communal spaces, socializing, catching up with neighbors, treating the latrine the way we might treat a coffee shop. The same open communal culture that shaped their public baths and their forums extended fully into the bathroom. What looks like a nightmare to us was just Tuesday to them. The real through line from ancient Greece to Tudor England to medieval London isn't discussed. It's that every civilization built whatever system made sense with what they had and then normalized it completely. The groom of the stool wasn't embarrassing to anyone in that court. The shared sponge wasn't mortifying to Romans. The gong farmer was a real profession with real pay and real social standing, even if you had to stand downwind. The only thing that changes is the technology. The human need to solve the problem and then just get on with life. That part never changes at all. If this kind of history is your thing, subscribe, because this channel goes exactly this deep on a regular basis. And drop a comment with the detail that got you the most. I'm genuinely curious whether it's the gladiator, the king's wiping assistant, or the fact that the Romans might have just been using the sponge to clean the seat this whole time. That one still gets me.